Okay, imagine this. You're in 18th century Paris. You see this guy just dripping in embroidered silk, huge wig, like a walking piece of art.
A real peacock, yeah.
Totally. Then, bam, jump to the 1900s. Everything's stark, practical, kind of severe in comparison.
Very different vibe. Very functional.
Or picture the 1940s, the zoot suit, all that fabric, that swagger, almost like a statement against everything going on.
Definitely a statement. Powerful visual history there.
Exactly. And that visual story, that evolution, that's what we're diving into today. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Now, you, our listeners, you send in some amazing stuff. We've got historical articles, museum notes, even a really interesting Reddit thread about vintage menswear.
Yeah, it's clear there's a lot of curiosity out there about how this all developed. And, it's more than just putting on clothes, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It feels like it taps into something deeply human.
It really does.
Yeah.
What we wear says so much.
Yeah. So our mission today, folks, is to kind of sift through all these sources you sent us, pull out the most interesting bits, and give you a really engaging overview. How did men's clothes evolve? What materials shaped them? What was going on culturally?
We'll try to trace it all the way from, the very first coverings up to more modern times.
It's going to be quite a journey. Now, before we get tangled in the threads of history, just a quick note. If you're enjoying this, if these stories get you thinking, please do head over to the All Sorts podcast on YouTube.
Yeah, we'd love to see you there.
Give us a like, share this deep dive with anyone else who loves this kind of stuff, and definitely subscribe so you stay in the loop. We've got a whole back catalog of explorations waiting for you too.
Lots to discover.
And for little behind-the-scenes bits and more chats, find All Sorts Podcast on X, Instagram, and Threads. Okay.
All right, let's do it.
So where does this whole story actually kick off, the very beginning of clothes?
Well, the simple act of wearing clothes, that's purely human, right? Nobody else does it. And your sources bring up some really cool ideas about how it started, like that University of Florida study. They looked at the evolution of body lice.
Lice. Seriously, how does that connect?
Well, their idea is that clothes created this new little environment for lice to evolve in. And they estimate this happened around 170,000 years ago.
170,000, wow.
Yeah. They link it to when humans started migrating out of Africa, needing protection from different climates. It was basically early technology.
So practical necessity driving it.
Pretty much. And anthropologists generally agree, early humans used what was around animal skins, plants, that sort of thing.
Okay, so skins and leaves first. When do we get actual textiles, like woven stuff?
That emerges later and in different places. You've got silk weaving in India, maybe around 400 AD.
Right.
But cotton spinning, that was way earlier in India, maybe 3000 BC. And even before that, there's evidence from the Indus Valley, a place called Mirgar, using cotton fibers way back, like 7000 BC.
So it wasn't just one invention, it popped up in different spots.
Exactly. It seems the need for textiles, maybe for practical reasons, maybe cultural expression, just arose independently, long before written history even.
That's wild. But I notice in the sources, there's still a bit of disagreement about the exact start date for clothes, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's no single agreed-upon answer. The estimates are all over the place. Some say 40,000 years ago. Others push it back, potentially millions.
Millions, really.
Well, that's a far end of speculation. But places like the Max Planck Institute, they've done studies, again, using lice genetics, mutation rates.
Those lice are really telling a story.
They are. There are studies like one in 2003, another in 2011. They narrow it down a bit more, suggesting somewhere between 40,000 and 170,000 years ago.
Okay, that feels a bit more concrete.
And archaeology keeps adding pieces.
Yeah.
Like a find in Morocco, reported in 2021, evidence of actual clothes-making tools, maybe 90,000 to 120,000 years old.
Wow, tools.
Yeah. Then you get cave paintings around 30,000 years ago showing what looked like draped skins. Actual textile clothing seems to emerge later, maybe 27,000 years ago. And we have real, tangible fragments of textiles dated to about 7,000 BC.
Find something you can actually hold, almost. What kind of tools were they using back then for textiles?
Well, archaeologists have found things like net gauges from around 5,000 BC, spindle needles, weaving sticks, the basic kit.
Simple but effective, I guess.
And there's some thought that felt, made from matted animal fibers might have been an early textile, maybe even before weaving got complex.
Right, like pressing wool together.
Exactly. And we even have evidence of plant-based textiles pretty early on. In South America, Peru, vegetable fibers dated to 8,000 BCE.
Amazing.
And actual examples of something called knoll binding. It's like a precursor to knitting, using a single needle found in Israel from around 6500 BC.
Just shows incredible ingenuity, doesn't it? Okay, let's jump forward a bit. Ancient civilizations. What can we learn about textiles and clothes from, say, the Near East?
Okay, the Near East, really early evidence there. Ketelhuyuk, in modern-day Turkey, they found the earliest known woven textiles made of flax.
Flax, like for linen.
Exactly. That dates to around 6000 BC. And evidence suggests they were cultivating flax even earlier, like 8000 BC.
So plant fibers were key early on.
Very much so. Breeding sheep specifically for their woolly fleece came a bit later, maybe around 3000 BC. But they found incredibly well-preserved linen from a place called the Cave of the Warrior around 3200 BC.
Incredible preservation. What about ancient India? You mentioned cotton earlier.
Yeah, India's early evidence is a bit more fragmentary. Some twisted cotton threads found at Indus Valley sites.
And those famous figurines.
Right, like the terracotta figures from Mehrgarh. One looks like it might have a turban.
Yeah.
And the famous priest king statue from Mohenjo-daro wearing that patterned shawl.
Uh-huh.
But, interpreting clothing just from statues is always a bit tricky. You get clearer pictures later on, like statues showing dhotis or depictions of Buddha in robes, or figures like Shakuntala in a sari.
Gotcha. Okay, what about Egypt? We always picture linen, mummies.
Absolutely. Linen was huge in ancient Egypt. They were masters of spinning, used looms, first horizontal ones on the ground, then vertical ones.
And not just for mummies, right?
Oh, no. It was everyday wear, too. Artwork shows men in linen kilts, women in these, often sheer pleated linen dresses, shirts, jackets, really elegant stuff.
Right. Moving across the Mediterranean, what about classical Greece? Different approach.
Yeah, somewhat different. They used what's called a warp-weighted loom, good for making big pieces of fabric.
Big pieces.
Yeah, because their clothing wasn't usually sewn or tailored like we think of it. It was mostly large rectangles of wool or linen draped around the body and pinned.
Ah, like togas, although that's Roman, isn't it?
Similar idea. But Greek garments had names like peplos, chlamys, chiton, hymation. It's a very different aesthetic, focused on the drape of the fabric.
Why do you think they preferred that? Just the technology or?
Probably a mix of both. The loom technology favored large rectangles, and culturally, maybe there was an appreciation for that kind of simplicity and how the fabric fell naturally.
Interesting. And ancient Europe, outside of Greece and Rome.
Europe shows a neat progression. Neolithic times, it was mostly flax and other plant fibers, what they call bast fibers. Wool textiles start showing up in the late Neolithic.
Okay.
Bronze Age, you get coarser wool fabrics. They found some in salt mines, in Hallstatt, actually. Plain weaves, twill weaves, natural colors, some dyes.
Mines, wow.
Yeah, amazing preservation. Then in the Iron Age, the wool gets finer, probably better sheep breeding. You start seeing stripes, more complex patterns.
And they found actual clothes.
Yes, incredibly, from peat bogs.
Yeah.
Woven wool dresses, tunics, skirts, even trousers or breeches, decorated with different colors. They also wore animal skin capes, fur side in for warmth, skin hats, leather shoes.
It's just incredible what survived. Okay, fast forward again. The medieval period. Big changes.
Definitely changes. In the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople, the elite were importing luxury stuff. Silk was huge, maybe some cotton, fine linens, dyed wools. Embroidery was everywhere.
And for regular people?
More basic stuff. Local, homespun wool, often undyed, maybe with some simple decoration. Practicality first.
Right. And in Western Europe, the High Middle Ages.
That's when you see real strides in wool production dyeing, working it. Wool becomes the material for outerwear.
What about underneath?
Linen gets much more common for underclothes because you could wash it easily. Cotton was known, but imported, mostly used for things like padding or quilting.
Oh, silk.
Big status symbol. The Crusaders brought back more knowledge and desire for fine silks from the East. Italy became famous for its silks, often with these repeating patterns influenced by Ottoman styles, even Chinese designs coming via the Silk Road.
So trade was really driving fashion.
Hugely. Then you get to the Renaissance. How did things shift then?
Wool was still king, right? Across Europe.
Yep. Wool remained the most popular fabric, available in all sorts of qualities. Think of English broadcloth. Very important. Linen and hemp were also widely used.
And colors.
Lots of rich dyes for wool. And as Europe got generally wealthier, even the middle classes in cities started wearing more complex clothes, kind of following the trends set by the nobility, but maybe a bit simpler.
And different countries started looking different.
Yeah, you really start to see more distinct national styles emerging during the Renaissance.
Okay, Enlightenment, colonial period. What's happening now? We're getting closer to the modern era.
Well, first, important to remember, the indigenous clothing in North America. They were using local fibers, cotton, agave, plus animal skins, deer, beaver. That beaver pelt trade became a huge deal with Europeans.
Right, the fur trade.
Exactly.
Right.
Meanwhile, in Europe, there was a massive boom in importing Indian cottons, especially those printed ones, chintzes. Huge fashion for women's dresses. Later, simple white muslin also became really popular.
This feels like it's leading somewhere. Wasn't there a big shift in men's fashion around then?
Yes. You're thinking of the great male renunciation, late 18th century.
Enunciation. Sounds dramatic. What did they renounce?
Basically, color and bling. Wealthy Western men largely stopped wearing really bright colors, ornate fabrics, elaborate decorations. That stuff became seen as more feminine.
So men's fashion got boring.
Well, maybe more subtle. The focus shifted to the quality of the cloth, the precision of the cut, tailoring differences, less about showing off with decoration, more about understated quality.
Who came up with that name? Great male renunciation.
A historian named John Flugel back in 1930. It's seen as a really major turning point. Men basically ceded flamboyant adornment to women.
Do we still see the effects of that today, like in suits?
Absolutely. Think about the modern business suit. Mostly subdued colors, focus on fit material, right? You can trace that lineage back. It was a lasting shift.
Fascinating. Okay, then the Industrial Revolution hits. Huge changes everywhere. How did it impact clothing and textiles?
Oh, massively. Mechanization, water wheels, then steam engines completely changed fabric production. Spinning, weaving, it moved from homes and small workshops into massive factories. Mass production begins.
But were clothes instantly mass-produced too?
Not quite instantly. Making the fabric got mechanized first. Assembling the actual clothes, that stayed largely hand-done for a while longer.
Oh, until...
The sewing machine, its invention and spread in the 19th century was the game changer for clothing production. Made it much, much faster.
Right.
And you had better transport, steamboats, canals, railroads. That meant you could create national markets, sell factory-made goods everywhere.
Were there reactions against this industrialization in clothing?
Yeah, you had things like the dress reform movement, mostly aimed at women's restrictive clothing, but it also influenced menswear, promoting simpler, more practical stuff. Think knitted wool union suits, for example. More comfort, less fuss.
Made possible by those new machines, presumably.
Exactly. Everything starts connecting.
Okay, into the 20th century, things really accelerate now, don't they?
Absolutely. It's an explosion of innovation. New ways to use textiles, brand new synthetic fibers invented, computers start getting involved in manufacturing.
And socially.
Big changes, too. Early 20th century, you see major unionization efforts in the garment and textile industries, especially in the U.S., fighting for better conditions.
And education caught up.
Yeah, universities started creating specific programs for textiles and clothing. Even, like, high schools had collections to study historical clothing. People recognized it as a serious field.
What about the fabrics themselves? What were the big breakthroughs?
Huge focus on engineering specific properties, making fabric stronger, more elastic, more durable. They did this mechanically by changing the fibers themselves and with chemical finishes.
Finishes? Like what?
Things to make fabric resistant to stains, flames, wrinkles, even microbes. And dye technology improved massively so they could color fibers that were difficult before.
And then came the synthetics.
The big ones. Nylon, PTFE, which is Teflon, basically polyester, spandex, Kevlar, mostly invented between the 1930s and 70s. They totally changed the game, often blended with natural fibers.
And the machines kept getting smarter.
Yep. Computer numerical control, CNC, came into textile machines in the 60s. Then the first computer-controlled electronic jacquard loom in '83, making complex patterns easier. Robots started doing tasks like picking and placing fabric pieces in the late 80s.
Must have changed the jobs completely.
Totally. Suddenly, machine operators needed computer skills, and you got new tech like spectrophotometers for perfect color matching, automatic inspection systems, very high tech.
Which brings us pretty much up to date, the 21st century. What stands out now?
Well, a fun little tidbit, apparently Google Images search was partly inspired by everyone searching for that green Versace dress Jennifer Lopez wore to the Grammys in 2000.
No way, that dress.
That's the story. Made of sheer silk chiffon, jungle pattern. So many searches, Google realized they needed an image search function.
Huh. Fashion-driving tech. What about less fun stuff?
Growing concerns, definitely. Potential health effects from all the treatments and dyes used on fabrics. Things like textile contact dermatitis seem more common.
And waste, I imagine. Fast fashion.
Huge issue. People are buying more clothes than ever, but keeping them for shorter times. It creates enormous amounts of textile waste. The environmental impact is significant.
And it's a massive global industry.
Absolutely enormous. In 2013, textile and apparel exports were worth over $770 billion. Top exporters in 2016 were places like China, Bangladesh, Vietnam, India. It's truly globalized.
Okay, let's circle back and look closer at some specific times using those museum and other sources. Late 18th century, those macaronis again. Tell me more about them.
Right, the macaronis. This was after the 7 Years' War, so there was peace, and wealthy young Englishmen could do the grand tour of Europe, especially Italy.
Ah, the gap year of its day.
Kind of. And they came back having picked up these, well, flamboyant Italian and French fashions, totally different from the more sober English style.
And they got called macaroni after pasta.
Exactly. It was a bit mocking, like they were overly concerned with foreign tastes. Remember the song Yankee Doodle stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni? It's making fun of someone trying too hard to be fashionable and foreign.
So it was a deliberate look-at-me style.
Totally. Excessive attention to appearance, defying the norms. Think ridiculously high wigs, expensive imported silks and satins, lots of frills and decoration.
What about colors?
Really striking pastels, pea green, orange, pink. Green was apparently quite fashionable because it was difficult, therefore expensive, to dye well.
And the cut of the clothes.
Super tight. Tailored to within an inch of their lives. Probably quite restrictive to move in. The LACMA Museum has a great example. A suit from about 1770, waistcoat, even the fancy sword they carried.
And accessories to match, I bet.
Oh yeah, tiny little hats perched on the giant wigs, swords that were purely decorative, diamond or gilt buckles on their shoes, big floral corsages, watches dangling from fancy chains, over the top.
Wild. Now, same time period, late 18th century, but across the channel. The French Revolution. How did that powder keg affect fashion?
Paris was the fashion capital, right? A huge chunk of its economy was just making clothes and wigs and things for rich guys, full-skirted coats, knee breeches, silk stockings, fancy vests.
But the revolution changed everything.
Completely. Clothing suddenly became intensely political. What you wore showed whose side you were on. They even passed laws early on banning dress that signaled your social rank.
So visual cues were critical.
Absolutely. Royalists might wear vests with the fleur-de-lis. Revolutionaries, like Robespierre, wore vests with revolutionary symbols. LACMA has this amazing revolutionary vest.
What's special about it?
It's got incredible symbolism woven in butterflies with clipped wings, maybe representing the end of aristocratic dandyism, and French sayings like, the habit does not make the monk.
Sure.
But, ironically, it's still really detailed and finely made, even while promoting simpler ideals.
A bit contradictory.
A little bit. And things got really serious. By 1794, you had to wear the tricolor cockade red, white, blue to show you supported the revolution. Not wearing one could get you labeled a counter-revolutionary. Dangerous stuff.
So what happened to men's style after the Reign of Terror?
It became much more subdued. Revolutionary leaders often made a point of dressing informally, even sloppily. Being too stylish, too clean could actually make you suspect.
Wow. And the famous sans-culottes, what was their look?
Right, sans-culottes means without knee breeches. The aristocracy wore tight knee breeches, so working-class revolutionaries adopted loose, long cotton trousers as a direct political statement against them.
Simple but powerful.
Exactly. LACMA even has a pair from around 1790 with red, white, and blue stripes. Other key items were the carmagnole, a short working-class woolen jacket, and the bonnet rouge, that red felt liberty cap. Very potent symbols.
Okay, let's leap forward again. The 1920s, the Jazz Age. What were men wearing then?
After World War I, people wanted to dress up again. Men's fashion really evolved new shapes, new fabrics. Hats were still pretty much essential, though.
What kind of hats?
The fedora really took off. Softer, more casual than older hats, you could shape the brim. Flat caps, newsboy caps were common too, especially for working guys. And straw boaters for summer, of course.
Did the war affect anything else, like facial hair?
Yeah, interestingly, mustaches became less popular, something maybe because of gas masks in the war. Most men were clean-shaven or had just a small, neat mustache.
What about suits?
They got a closer fit, more tailored, accentuating the waist, sometimes belted, like the Norfolk jacket style. Pockets often slanted.
Curler.
Shirts got softer. Attached collars like we have now became popular with younger men. Older guys or upper-class men might still wear detachable collars.
And vests. Trousers.
Vests usually matched the suit for a three-piece look, but odd vests, different colors or patterns, were used for more casual styles. Trousers were still fairly slim, and belts became more common in the U.S. rather than suspenders. Though later in the decade, you got those really wide-leg Oxford bags.
Shoes. Big changes there.
Boots became less common for everyday wear. Oxfords, brogues, spectator shoes, those two-tone ones were really popular. Generally, shoes had higher heels, rounder toes, meter details, probably better quality than the average shoe today.
And Converse. Chuck Taylors.
They were invented then, yeah, but for basketball. They weren't really street fashion yet.
Any key accessories?
Canes were still sometimes carried more as a
Yeah.
fashion thing. Pocket squares became more common, partly because silk got cheaper. And knitwear really arrived. V-neck sweaters, cardigans, shawl collars, much more casual options.
Okay, final stop. The 1930s, 40s, and the zoot suit. Such an iconic loaded garment.
Totally iconic. And yeah, loaded with social meaning. It came out of jazz and swing culture, movies, press.
Who wore them?
It was really popular among minority and immigrant youth. Filipino, Japanese, Jewish, Italian Americans, especially young Mexican Americans, the Pachucos and African Americans. Think young Malcolm X, Cesar Chavez, musicians like Dizzy Gillespie, Cab Calloway.
What did it represent for them?
It was a way to stand out, assert their presence, their identity, in a society that often marginalized them, a kind of visual rebellion. It even spread to France during the Nazi occupation. The Zazous wore variations as a quiet defiance.
But it wasn't universally loved, right?
Far from it. Mainstream society often saw it negatively, linked it with working-class youth, sometimes even with petty crime stereotypes. Some venues banned them. Police sometimes targeted wearers.
Even within those communities.
Yeah, some parents and middle-class minority members worried it just attracted negative attention and discrimination.
And this was during wartime rationing, too.
Exactly. The War Production Board restricted fabric use in 1942, but zoot suits, using lots of fabric, stayed popular. The press started calling wearers unpatriotic.
Which led to the riots.
The zoot suit riots in L.A., 1943. Terrible stuff. Clashes between sailors and zoot suiters boiled over. Off-duty Marines and sailors went into neighborhoods, attacking anyone in a zoot suit, stripping them in public.
That's horrific.
It was. And the police often arrested the victims, the zoot suiters, supposedly for their own protection, while the servicemen usually faced no consequences. Similar riots happened elsewhere too. Some called it style warfare.
Just shows how much meaning can be packed into clothes.
Absolutely. The LACMA has an actual zoot suit from that era, 1935-45, a rare survivor and a powerful symbol of that whole conflict.
Wow, what a journey. So from, basic survival needs way back when to the political statements of the French Revolution, the flamboyance of the macaronis, the rebellion of the zoot suit, it's clear men's fashion and textiles are way more than just fabric.
They really are. They reflect technology, economics, social structures, personal identity, defiance. It's all woven in there.
And thinking about you, our listeners, wanting to get a good grasp on things quickly, we hope this deep dive has given you some of those aha moments, a clearer picture without feeling totally bogged down in dates and names.
Yeah, hopefully it pieces together the main threads of the story in an engaging way.
So, a final thought to leave everyone with. Looking at fashion today, how fast it changes, but also thinking about the history, the weight these clothes carried. What silent statements do you think our clothes today might be making to people looking back in a few hundred years?
That's a great question to ponder. What story are we telling now?
Indeed. Well, the story of clothes is always unfolding. If you enjoyed unraveling some of it with us, please show some love for the All Sorts podcast on YouTube.
Please do.
Like this deep dive, share it around, and hit subscribe so you catch our next exploration. And definitely check out our archives for past dives.
There's plenty more to explore.
And for extra bits and pieces, follow All Sorts Podcast on X, Instagram, and Threads.
We'll see you there.
Until our next deep dive, keep looking closely at the world around you. There are fascinating details everywhere,